I can't. Okay. Good morning. So we're going to do chapter 7, Perek Zion in Shoftim now. So we had just left off. The last time we spent some time discussing the comparisons, the reverse comparison, going from the story of Gidon to the story of Abraham, and it'll be enhanced a little bit more. Just again, knowing that we have that connection, but it'll be enhanced more by the text here. So he destroyed the idols of his father, and his father stood up from saying, like, well, if they're so strong, why don't the idols fight him back? Like, why doesn't he do that like that? Okay. So the pasuk begins, Vayashkem Yeruba'al hu Gidon v'chol ama sharito v'yachanu al ein charod and umachanei midyan haylo mitzafon migvat hamoreh be'emek. So Yeruval, now remember at the end of the last chapter, he was renamed Yeruval, meaning, and it said where was it? Wait, we changed his name. Oh, here in the top on 32. Vayikra lo bayamahu Yeruval lemor yarev bo haba'al kinatat etzmes b'cho. He was called Yeruval because let Baal take up the grievance for him for breaking his altar. So now he's called by his nickname and also his real name. So names are very, very important. Names are a defining feature of a person. So here, when he's about to go out to battle, he's known as sort of the conqueror. In other words, why is he going to be victorious? Because first of all, he had to do the first thing was to destroy the Baal idol. And by the way, it's Yuval and it's Gidon. If you also notice, I don't know how it's broken up in your sefer, but it's actually the end of a chapter. It's the first perek of the chapter. The first sentence of the chapter is actually the last line of the paragraph. Like that happens sometimes. So you could see here, okay. So you see it's the end of the paragraph, but the first pasuk is actually a line earlier. So that's when we do chapter and verse in Tanakh. It's not always what we call a parsha. It's not always what we call a section. Sometimes a section is defined just by, it's topically defined, and it could be that you have a chapter break in the middle of another section, which is exactly what happens here. So he goes and he takes his nation with him, and they go to a place called Ein Charod, and the camp of Midian is to his north from the hill of Moreh in the valley. Okay, now he has to get instruction. What is he supposed to do? So, Vayomer Hashem El Gidon, we're in Perek Pasuk Beis. Perek Zion Pasuk Beis. Rav Ha'am Asher Itach Mititi Es Midyan Biadam Pen Yispe'er La Yisrael Lemor Yadi Hoshia Li. He says, Hashem says something really interesting. You got too many people. There's too many people fighting with you. Okay? In order to deliver Midian into your hand, because he says, we're worried that Pen Yispe'er La Yisrael. Because they're gonna take themselves a little too seriously. They're gonna say, "Oh, my own strength has saved me." Yadi Hoshieli. And as a matter of fact, we know this that in Sefer Devarim, there's a whole passage where Hashem says to the Jewish people, and Moshe commands them, "Listen, Hashem's going to do battle for you. Hashem hu hanos in koach." And one of the failings is going to happen is you're going to say, "Kochi va'otzim yadi asali esachayil hazeh." Is that you're going to say, "Oh, it was my strength. It was the might of my hand that created this victory." A lot of people have used this language in modern Jewish history, and they say, if you want to be philosophical about Israel's wars, I'm just going to open the door for Dina. She's coming in. Let's see here. Pull it hard. There we go. And they say that, and after the absolutely miraculous victory of 1967, so what happened? There came 1973. So many people like to philosophize, if you like that word. They like to say, oh, because after 1967, there was this huge bravado in Israel of, look what we can do. Okay. And at the same time, they were knocked down a few pegs after 73. It worked kind of both ways, because we saw at the beginning of this war how humbling and well, that's a very soft word to use, and they still haven't really dealt with it yet. But then a couple of months ago, when the tides turned a little bit, the whole episode with the pagers and the walkie-talkies, and then taking out this guy and that guy in a matter of 10 days, and they took out the whole leadership, and then Syria falls, and Syria is becoming an issue again now. Who knows? But I'm just saying all those things, and now you understand why they had to destroy 80%, Perek 80% of the Syrian weaponry that was left behind. I mean, now you understand why they had to do it. So it's kind of like the reverse of that. But here, Hashem's saying, you have too many people. You have too many people. You know, if you say things enough, or if you do things enough, you start to believe what you're saying or believe what you're doing. Okay. We always have a saying about, somebody who's standing on third base thinking he hit a triple, but it's not the case. It's because, he did so well in life. Well, no, your father created the whole business. Your grandfather did everything, and you just have to be, born right. So that doesn't mean you're particularly smart or successful. So we know this. So he says, okay, there's too many people. So here's what we're going to do. Ve'ata pasakimol. Ve'ata karana ba'aznei ha'am le'mor. Mi yarei v'chared yashov yitzpor mehar gilad. V'yashav min ha'am 22,000 alfim nisharu. So he says, now call out to the ears of the people. Ba'aznei ha'am, it's a term that's used quite a number of times in Tanakh. Ba'aznei ha'am, when you speak to, where else are you going to speak to them? But sometimes you say things, and then sometimes you have to say things so that people will listen. Ba'aznei ha'am. You have to say things so that people will acknowledge what you're saying, so that people will internalize what you're saying, which, as someone who spends a good deal of my life trying to get people to internalize things or trying to get people to listen to things, there's listening. And then there's after every sermon, the guy who's passed out cold the whole time, which again, I look at as a valuable service that I provide. But I heard everything you said, Rabbi. And I thank you. I appreciate it. Or that was great. That was wonderful. Yeah, good. I hope it didn't disturb your snoring, which is fine. It's really fine. But we say something bazneham when there's a certain emphasis. So he says to them,
you already have in the Torah that if you're afraid, you come.
Oh, very good. So we have that in the laws of war and the laws of engagement. There are a number of exemptions. A number of exemptions are, and by the way, that only applies to Mechemes Rishus, not to a Mechemes Mitzvah. Mechemes Mitzvah, there's no exemption. It says, who just got married or just got betrothed and did not yet have a chance to live in his house? Who just planted a vineyard, okay? And who is unable to do that? And then who is afraid? Hayarei v'rach levav. Here it doesn't use the word rach levav. It says yarei is the same word. Rach levav literally means soft of heart, which you can imagine. People are scared. War is scary, very, very scary. I've spoken to a lot of soldiers in the last, now it's 17 months. And people have admitted to me, yeah, they're scared. It's always, yeah, of course I'm scared, but we have a job to do and we have a nation to protect. And, I'm more scared of what happens if I don't go. Putting that in perspective. But here it says, v'chared. You want to be funny.
What?
You want to be a little funny. Who's Yarei and who's Haredi?
Oh, Haredi. Oh, yeah, they'll have more than 20 people.
Sorry, too soon? Yeah, no. A little Purim Torah. It's okay. Maybe that's where they get it from. I don't know. Anyway, so
Haredi does come from Haredi.
Of course, I'm saying, but not we don't usually think of the Haredim in terms of in the context of war.
It's a question about that too, but too much of attention.
Yeah, there's a famous one of the great self-improvement Jewish thought firm called Sefer Haredim, right, from the Kabbalists, from back in the day. Yeah. So, but he's Yashov Yitzpor. He should go and leave Mehar Gilad. Okay, and he says V'yitzpor Mehar Gilad, Vayitzpor, and they say it means to go early in the morning. The Mitzudas Dov is, he play on the word like something like like the word is to separate. We have a play on the words. We have Etzrafenu and Yitzpor. Yitzpor, Mitzudas says Yashkimu Baboker Laman Lo Yirim Adam B'Shuv Maleich Limon. Okay, so where does that come from? So the Mitzudas says that the word for morning in Aramaic is Tzafra. We say it in Karibon, Tzafra v'Ramsha. Right, so tzafra is boker. So there's, okay, you're gonna leave. Let's at least do it with dignity, so you don't have to be ashamed. So although how many went? 22,000. 22,000 out of 32,000. I think they might notice. Okay, I think they might notice. Okay, that when there's only 10,000 people left, but it's gonna get better. Don't worry. So he says, okay, if you want to go at dawn. Okay, no harm, no foul. And nobody's being criticized for this. He's given the opportunity. If you don't want to take leave, okay, fine. And so there's 10,000 left. Vayomer Hashem el Gidon od ha'am rav hored al sam el amayim etzotfenu lecha sham v'haya shamar lecha ze yelech itachu yelech itachu v'shamar lecha ze lo yelech imachu lo yelech. 10,000 still too many. Too many. Okay, so here's what you do. He's going to give you another test. He says, go down to the water, and I'm going to filter them out there. Here, the word it's a similar, but it's a play on the word. Yitzpor is the etzrafenu. Okay, so he says the Metzudas is like when you take the dross off of silver, right? When you have to etzrafen, it's the same word that's used, right? What's the famousest silver company in the whole world? Hatzorfim, right? You know, when you drive on the Jerusalem Tel Aviv highway and you see them like in Nofi Alon over there, the giant, like, right? Or I never quite understood why they have a giant store in the airport also. Like, okay, I'm ready to go. You know, let me buy a 3,000-pound menorah right now and take it on the plane with me. Any of those things in duty free, I haven't understood, like the vacuum cleaners or a toaster. Like, how does that work? But you brought it home with you?
No, not for Israel.
But how'd you do it? You leave it there? They deliver it?
Leave it in Israel, and then it's true.
But we have to come back and get it.
Well, we have a box.
No, I'm saying, but like, when you buy it, but you can only buy it on the way out.
That's right.
So how do you get it?
They leave it. They hold it for you.
So you can get it when you come back in?
Yeah.
That's how it works? I always wondered. Thank you for answering that. Because I'm thinking, like, nobody's buying a Dyson vacuum cleaner
Yes, they are.
and bring it on the plane. So you're allowed to do that as long as you leave the country.
Is there a certain amount of time to hold it for?
I just know they've got a toaster oven there.
Because then doesn't that kind of defeat the whole purpose of duty free? Meaning, isn't it supposed to be if you're leaving the country? But I guess somebody found like a selling the chametz loophole. Oh, you're leaving. Okay, so everybody needs a new Dyson in Israel. Now we know what to do. Fine. Or a 29,000-inch TV. So he says that's the word, the definition of the word yitzrafenu. And I'll tell you, when you go there to the water, I'm going to tell you whatever I say to you, this is going to go. He's in, he's out. Now, this is interesting how they figure this out. Okay. So Vayored esa'am el hamayim. So he brings the nation down to the water. Vayomer Hashem el Gidon kol asher yalok bilashono min hamayim kasher yalok hakelev tatzika solevad v'chol asher echad bekav lishtos. Fascinating. Yelek is the word to lick up, to lap. He says, anyone who laps the water with his tongue like a dog, he stands apart, and everyone who kneels on his knees to drink. Okay, so what happened? So there's in other words, when you go down to the water, there's two ways to. How would you take water? Like you would cup it up, or you would take something that utensil. But let's.
Who goes to what? The tongue or the other?
Well, the.
Keep the tongue.
But let's say somebody's so thirsty. You have the image of somebody who's so thirsty and it's in the desert, like jump in and stick their head in the water like that. Yeah, but how do you jump in? You have to get on your knees first in order to jump into the water. In other words, in order to reach your head into the water, you have to be on your knees. That's a very telling part. Okay, so Vahi mispar hamelakikim biadam SPM 300 ish v'chol yeser am karo b'chem lishtos mayim. So the number of those who lapped with their hands, if they took with their hands to their mouth, was 300, and the rest got on their knees. Okay, so 9,700 get on their knees, and 300 don't. Okay. So it's going to become quite obvious what's going on here is that, it's like that old Hanukkah story. Remember the Hanukkah story with, was it Hannah and her 7 children? And to bow down to the idol, and each one did, each one refused, and he killed them. And the youngest one, he said he put the idol around his neck as a necklace, or he's like dropped it on the floor. Can you pick it up for me? Like that whole medrash, okay? And the kids still refused to do it, okay? Because we don't bow down. I don't know about you, but I feel very, very weird on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur when we bow down on the floor. I feel
100%. So we board up, we don't bow down, and I didn't see that till I came to Lewiston.
And it's like Nispashet b'chol ha'olam. That's the time. Now, ultimately speaking, they took it from us. The Welt took it from us, but it's one of those things that when you say we don't follow Chukos Hagoyim, we don't follow in ritual practices. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So if the whole world does something, but we originated it, but now they made it more popular. So I'll give you an example. There's a custom that on Shavuos we place greenery around the shul. Okay, some people are against that practice because in many around it was always fell around Palm Sunday and Easter. And they used to spread it around, even though they copied us and we started it, but they made it more popular. So now people look at it as a goyish thing, but in actuality, it's so this is I'm just telling you, we don't bow. We don't you know, I even feel like if I have to tie my shoe,
Bend.
you bet like I put my foot on a chair or something to tie it also because I'm old and I can't reach, but to like get on your knees, I just feel weird or like just waiting and it just feels and especially Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur and full out on the floor and putting my back. It's the weirdest thing, right? Because when you see what's going on in the world, you know, there are like 8 million people bowing at once. It's actually pretty cool to see when you see like in Mecca, when everybody davens at the same time. That's what it means to daven, you know, in unison. We're still working on that's like 14 different people doing different things at once. But to bow down, like, yeah, we don't do that. Anyway, so
Do you think Hashem used this concept specifically for a way to weed out the number that he wanted? It had nothing to do with the drinking and the licking and the whatever. It was this is the way
Absolutely.
he knew he would get a minority.
absolutely,
that he needed.
absolutely. And that's all the Mepharshim point that out, okay? Because it says, Vayomer Hashem Agidon, b'shlosh me'asa isha malakakin oshi eschem, v'nasati es midyam yadecha, v'chol ha'am yelchu ish lo mekamo. Those 3 lappers, the 300 lappers, they're the ones who are going to go and deliver midyan to your hand, and the rest can go home.
But the funny thing about it is it has nothing to do with their military prowess.
That's exactly the point, is because they
They
wanted to
just
show,
wanted to
correct,
show.
correct.
There's something uncomfortable.
Right. And because if there were too many, they would think it's their military prowess. And maybe that's also why when he's introduced in the chapter, it says Yerubal hu Gidon, he's the one that defeated the Baal. Even though you defeated the Baal, there's still a little bit of Baal in everybody. It was so rampant, it was so prevalent, the Avodah Zarah worship. So even if it looks like Avodah Zarah worship, so people who are careful not to even have it look like Avodah Zarah worship, they're the ones that we chose. But everyone else, because maybe it was so habitual, it was so part of their life that people bowing down all the time. So maybe that's why they were weeded out, okay? Or if they're at the water, we should say filtered out. Fine. It's the original Brita in the Tanakh, okay? And also, I've always thought that, you know, the if you're into like Greek wars and mythology, you know, the story of the 300. No? Yeah, I made a great movie about it. Oh, if you like blood and guts and gore, okay. Anyway, the 300 Spartans that fought, and okay, never mind. And this is where I would usually pick on, if she's going to watch it after, I pick on Elian. I'm like, Elian, here's a movie you have to watch and report back. But Elian, don't watch this movie. It's not for you. Okay. But it's a great Greek legend how they held off Xerxes and his army at the pass, what's called the Hot Gates. And they funneled this huge army, but into a very small area. That doesn't matter how big the army was, until they were betrayed by someone, and they found an old path to get it to do an end around. But until then, they fought off major armies of Persia at the time. These 300 Spartans. Okay, so they go back and so they go back. I'm sorry. Ve'ez kol ish Yisrael shilach ish lahalav, uvishlosh me'asa ish hachazik, machane v'yon ha'lo mitachas v'emek. So they took the provisions of the other people. So the 300 now, okay, you're leaving war, at least give me your stuff. Okay, and they took their shofars. This is going to be really interesting. And there's going to be reminiscent of something that happens in the Yom Kippur War, which is recreated in the Yom Kippur War. I have to look up, I meant to look up the story. I have to look it up. If you remind me, I'll look it up and send you this story. It's a great story. And all the men of Israel, he sent them each to his home. He kept 300, and Midian is below in the valley. So they're up high, they're in the valley. Okay, now, Vayhi balayla hahu. I actually did a Tanakh search of how many times balayla hahu appears. Oh, it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot. That exact phrase. Not just in it says balayla hu nadash nasa melech. I'll just tell you again right now. This is the beauty of the
Exactly. What are you using to do Tanakh search?
the interwebs, the Tanakh app. It's a Tanakh by Rusty Brick, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times in Chumash. Okay, so you have like Vatashkena Gam Balayla Hu Asabien with Lot and his daughters. And Hashem appears to Abraham in the middle of the night in a dream, and Esav and Yaakov Balayla Hu Vayolan Shem Balayla Hu. So for them on Bereshis, and also the same thing over there with Yaakov and Esav. And then once in Bamidbar, that Tisha B'Av, the Meraglim, everybody cried Balayla Hu. We had it in Yehoshua a couple of times. We had in the beginning of Shoftim when he says to take the par of your father and thing. So we have a bunch of times Shoftim, Shmuel, Malachim, and then in Esther. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 5 is 14 times. But that's exact by us. So this Tanakh app, by the way, which is great. It's the Rusty Brick Tanakh app. It has a full text, but here I'll show you it's this. It just says Tanakh. It's the blue one.
Okay.
Rusty Brick Tanakh. Yeah. So the same one that do the Siddur app. They do the Siddur that, but what's great is it has searchability.
Is that the one difference that you would say? The searchability? And just
over
so
what?
many apps I can have.
I like V'lach B'derech is free,
Right.
but this one is I
That's
think
the
it's a
one-
paid app, but
that's the one
it's
that I have, and
very
it has Mefarshim and they're all.
yeah. This does not have Mefarshim. It just has bookmarks so you could share things, but it's just a pure search. I think when I bought it, I don't know, 15 years, 20 years ago, it's probably $1. I don't know, something like that. But it was I've already got a really good ROI on it. So really, really good. But it's these phrases that catch on. In other words, when the Torah says Balalu, like something big is happening. Okay. So it says, Vayomer love kum raid b'machaneh. Kum raid is another phrase. He says, arise and go down. Seems odd, like arise, should be like kum ale, but kum raid. Kinesatich biyadecha.
Well,
Because
they're down.
yeah, I'm saying, but you have to get up and go down. So then, because I've given you, v'im yarei ata l'redes, raid ata upara narchel ha'machaneh. He says, and if you're afraid, go down to the camp, you and your attendant Pura. He had a guy named Pura who was his second. It was his what's the word they use when the knights used to have their sidekick? What was it called?
Oh. Like your Sancho Panza kind?
Yeah. What's it called? Not. Come on, somebody's gotta know. Susie, you gotta know. You're a wordsmith, Susie. What's it called when you have the
Just his aid? I don't know.
No, something with a P, I think. Okay, we'll come to it. It's gonna drive me crazy. Anyway, so you go down, and then v'shemata ma'idaberu v'achar techazakna yadecha v'yarata b'machaneh v'yirid hu pura na'or al ksei chamushim asher b'machaneh. So listen to what they speak. Your hands will be strengthened, you'll descend into the camp. So he descended with Pura and he tended to his edge of the armed troops in the camp. So it's like, go get some intel. And you'll hear what's going on. If the two of you go down, I mean, there's only 300, but 2 of you go down.
So they're like separate, they're somewhere.
Yeah. Umidjin va'amalek kol b'nei kedem nothen ba'emek karba larov l'gmalem emes berka chol shal svas hayam larov. So Midian, Amalek, and all the people of the east were encamping in the valley. There was numerous as a locust swarm. The Torah loves to use arba as a measurement of how many people there are, and their camels were countless, as numerous as the sand of the seashore. In other words, there's a lot of people there. So there's 300 going up against this massive army. Squire, that's the word. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're right.
Oh,
Well then.
oh my God.
And that's what
Okay.
we do.
Yeah. So he goes, fine. Vayavo Gidon said, now he says to him, it's like, okay, go listen to the troops, what they're saying. There's a whole bunch of army against them, but listen to the troops, get the feel that you could perhaps figure out their morale, figure out what's going on with them. So Gidon arise, Vayavo, because he's at top, he has to manage things, but now go down with the rest of them, we're getting ready to go to battle. Vayavo Gidon, v'hinei ish misaper l'reu chalom. V'yomer hinei chalom chalamti, v'hinei tzilil lechem sarim misapech machaneh bedyan, v'yavo ara'ol v'yakehu v'yipol v'yapel l'mala v'nafal ha'oel. So he arrives and a man's telling a dream to his fellow. And he's like, listen, I had a dream. Oh, anytime anybody has a dream, that's always like, okay, listen up. When somebody says I had a dream, you should always pay attention because it's a shtickle nevuah when we say you have a dream. And roasted barley bread was rolling in the Midianite camp, and it came to the tent and struck it, and the tent fell. It turned it upside down, and the tent fell. Now, so obviously, if they're dreaming that barley, what started this whole thing? Remember that there was a blockade, and the people, they had to be in hiding, and they had to plant. So they were at a time of famine because they didn't have grain, they didn't have barley, and Gideon, remember, he's using non-farming tools to thresh and do these types of things. So that's exactly the sign. Oh, the barley is going to come and defeat us, meaning he sees clearly what it means. Vaya'an re'yo vayomer ein zos bilti im cherv Gideon ben Yosh Yisrael nasana lakim bi'ado es medyonim es kol ha'machaneh. So the fellow answers, oh, you know what that means? It must mean that the sword of Gideon, the son of Yoash, the man of Israel, Hashem has delivered Midian and the entire camp into his hands. So now the army, they believe he has a dream. Oh, you know what? We're going to win. Because you can imagine, wait a minute, there's only how many of us? And there's a gazillion of them out there. Are you crazy? Right? So, Vayhi kishma Gideon es mispar hachalom. Ve'es shivro vayishtachu. Vayashav ha'machane Yisrael vayomer kumu ki nasan Hashem be'etchem es machane Midian. So when Gideon heard the recounting of the dream and the interpretation, he bows down. He goes back to the camp of Israel and he's like, rise up, for Hashem has delivered the camp of Midian into your hand. Okay, so if even they don't believe it, that they're going to be victorious, so then, we could do it. So what happens? So he divides, after telling them, look, we're going to be victorious, because even they don't believe it, he divided the 300 men into 3 companies. Vayachatz, the same thing. When Yaakov Avinu, when he met Esav, when he was preparing me, it says also, he divided his camp. And there the trap is much more dramatic. It's Vayachatz. Here it's Vayachatz. The 300 into 3 pillars, or into 3 companies. And into the hand, everybody had a shofar, an empty jug, and a torch inside the jug. Okay, this is a really interesting military maneuver. When you think of a jug, I think more of like a giant bowl or something like that. I don't know exactly how this works, but we're going to see. So this is what's going to happen. This is great when it describes in detail the military strategy. Vayomer alehem mimeni tiru v'chein ta'asu v'hinei anochi ba b'ktzei ha'machaneh v'yakasher eseh kein ta'asu. He's like, listen, just do what I do. Follow my lead. When I arrive at the edge of the camp, then you'll do what I do. And by the way, he was not commanding from behind. He's commanding from in front. Okay, the age-old acharai. V'tzakati b'shofar anochi v'chol asher iti, u'tzakatem b'shofaros gamatem sivos kol machne v'martem l'Hashem l'Gideon. I'm going to sound the shofar. Me, everyone who's with me, and then you're going to sound your shofars all around the entire camp. You're going to say for Hashem and for Gideon, like a war, a battle cry.
Interesting that he's including himself in the battle cry.
Yeah, it is interesting. So the Mefarshim have like different opinions on it. Muslims say that it's, Hashem is delivering, but I'm the messenger. And he's going to deliver it through Gideon. In other words, have faith in me. And by the way, part of that is sometimes you have to, a strong leader says, yeah, you know what? You got to trust me. I'm work for God, but you got to trust me. This is what we're doing.
I'm saying necessarily is an inappropriate or egotistical.
No, yeah, exactly. Yeah, nobody. I don't think anybody reads it. Yeah, nobody reads it that way. But it is an interesting observation, which is quite striking that he would usually. But then again, Gideon is not Moshe Rabbeinu, and Gideon is like somewhat still. He's unsure of himself, as we saw. He needed this test, he needed that test. Give me this proof, give me that proof. So what happens? And this is where it gets really cool. So Vayavo Gideon ish asher ito b'ktzei ha'machaneh. So he has one of the companies. So he comes with 100. Rosh hashmoras hatichona achakem ekimas hashamrim v'yikvu shuvas v'nefot zakanim asher biyadam. So he comes at the edge of the camp, at the beginning of the middle watch, when they had just barely set up the guards. In other words, he comes at the changing of the guards. It's sometime in the middle of the night, early in the morning, whatever it is. In other words, when the guard is down, when they're lax. You always know that when there's a changing of the guard and this one's leaving and the other one's got to get his stuff on, he's coming, So it's always like a good point of infiltration because they're not at their highest awareness point. They sounded the shofar and they broke the jugs that were in their hands. So they're holding these containers that have lit fire inside of it, meaning they can't be seen. The fires can't be seen when they're approaching. 100 men, they're approaching. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there's all this noise. So they make the shofar. So 3 companies, they sound the shofars, they break their jugs. So in the left hand, they're holding a torch. In the right hand, the shofar. And they call out, the sword is for Hashem and for Gideon. Okay.
3 units are doing.
All 3 units in 3 different places. And think about it. Think of the confusion that's caused is that you have an enemy that's kind of left unawares, and then they come up and out of nowhere, they hear this noise, and all of a sudden flashing light. So what do the gazillion troops think? They're like, oh my God, there must be like 2 gazillion of them, because they're shocked by the noise and the light. And out of nowhere, when you see all this light, oh my God, there must be so many of them. So it was actually a really neat trick. It was a shock trick, okay? And Vayamdu ish tachtov saviv lemachaneh vayaretz kol hamachaneh vayanusu. And what happened? They sounded the 300 shofars, and I'm sorry, each stood in his place all around the camp, and the entire camp round, they shouted and they fled. They scared the Midian out of them, and they ran away. They sounded, right? Vayitku shlosh meos hashofros vayasam Hashem escherev ish berei v'chol hamachaneh v'yanatz hamachaneh beis hashita tzirei rasa ad sfas avel mechol ad tabas. They sounded 300 shofars, and they set each man's sword against his fellow, and throughout the entire camp, and they fled as far as Beit Shita, towards Reira, as far as the border of Abel Machola near Tabat, like way out. Okay, they flew right away. So, in other words, they tricked the Midianites into thinking that there was this huge force surrounding them, with the sound, with the light effects, and all these things. So it's actually very clever. And by the way, it's also a way to show this is obviously Yad Hashem. This is obviously Hashem causing this to happen, because in a normal circumstance, somebody, maybe 10,000 would stop and look and see what's going on. They didn't realize they're completely overrun, and to be scared like that. So the reason I have to look up the story, but to my recollection, I wasn't there. But there was a famous story in the Yom Kippur War somewhere in the Golan Heights, where there was a platoon and they were completely overrun. And I think it was either Yom Kippur War or the War of Independence. I have to look it up. But a similar tactic was used, where they just had these like noise cannons. They were out of ammunition. They had nothing to fire at, and they used just noise to make the enemy think. I think it was the approaching Syrians, to make them think that there was so many that they ran away. They were able to overtake this hill, right? It should be fairly easy to find. I just forgot to look at it today. I meant to do that, but that it would be a great repetition of history where that can happen. Because sometimes, like what do people do when I haven't been in a battle, sorry. And the warfare today is a lot different than it used to be. But when people were fighting hand-to-hand combat, so there's a lot of noise. And when the armies would come, they would come rushing, and they would come yelling and screaming. I guess it's the adrenaline going also, but you want to get yourself worked up. That's how they would work it. Okay, so they chased them really out, and then so once they're chasing them towards the north, and they have to leave. So then Vayitzaek ish Yisrael min Naftali min Asher min Kol Menashe. So now we can take some of our ancillary troops, and so they were from Naphtali, Asher, again, all from the north, all from Menashe, and they pursued Midian. Menashe half in Transjordan, half in Israel. Okay, it's like, let's chase them out. In other words, you're on your way out, let's make sure that you get a nice escort on your way out of our land. Okay. Umalachim shalach Gidon b'chol har Ephraim lemor redu lekras Midian v'lechdu lehem ad hamayim ad beis barev as Yarden v'yitzaek kol ish Ephraim v'lekedu as hamayim ad beis barev as Yarden. So he sends messengers. A lot of similarities also, by the way. This whole Esav and Yaakov showdown, also Malachim and Vayachatz, all is very similar, and also a battle that never really took place with Yaakov and Esav. It was like this big showdown, we're excited it's going to happen, but nothing actually ever happened. So he sends messengers throughout Har Ephraim, again, towards the north issue. So like, if you want to look where, just to show you, again, remind you where Ephraim is. So Ephraim is here, like in the center of the country, but he's pushing them out towards the Jordan. And also Menashe, he says, like, Menashe is up here, pushing them like out this way, and he's telling them, okay, Ephraim, you're going to get involved, and you're going to come down towards Midian and secure the waterway and block them and till the Jordan. So in other words, don't let them get anywhere strategic. We're gonna wedge them out. We're gonna squeeze them out, and that's what's going to happen. Right. So what happens? So that's what happens. So all the men of Ephraim were mustered. They occupied the water till Beit Bara and the Jordan. And then, just for good measure, Vayilkedu shnei sarei Midyan es Oriv es Ze'ev, Vayahargu es Oriv b'tzur Oriv es Ze'ev, Hargu b'Yekav Ze'ev, Vayidefu el Midyan, V'rosh Oriv u'Ze'ev heviu el Kidon me'ever li'Yarden. So they captured 2 leaders of Midyan, Oriv and Ze'ev. It's funny, he's like a Hebrew name, Ze'ev. But here they in English they call it Zeb, Zeeb. They killed Oriv at the rock of Oriv. They killed Zeb at the winepress of Zeb. I guess that's why they were named that. And they pursued Midian. They brought the heads of Oriv and Zeb to Gideon across the Jordan. So even in Transjordan on the way out, even though it is technically the territory of the Jewish people, but don't think that you could take that over. In other words, when you push them out, you want to push them way out. You don't want to, when you push an enemy out, you don't want them right on your border. You want to make sure that they're far, 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 far away, so they can't do any more damage to you. But this is quite a miraculous victory. What's interesting is the amount of detail that about what? Yeah, how it showed, like how they won. Well, it was like, okay, they went and they struck them, and we saw it in Yehoshua. Yeah, they went and they're gone. They went and they smote 600. They smote 6,000. Here it's like, no, and you're gonna plan, and you're gonna have the fire, and you're gonna have the shofar, and you're gonna do, and this one, and we have to weed out the troops.
Re-emphasizes the
Correct.
Really, but all those details lend themselves for you to appreciate it even.
Right, and so why? So ask yourself the question: why now do we need more of that detail, which we didn't have before? So to my understanding, I think it's just the further we get away from Sinai, the further we get away from like the source, the more we need.
But are we going to get more of these types of?
Well, we'll see. We'll see. Like the whole Shimshon battle, So I think that, and we've already proven that Gideon, who did not want to be the leader, and Gideon, who was just chosen, and Gideon, who asks for a sign, and it wasn't like he's like, as soon as they asked him, yeah, I'm in. Like, do you guys have a 401k? Yeah.
Should begin with.
Right, but that's for a different reason. That was mostly humility, and that was he didn't know. But in terms of once he had the job and Hashem said something, he did it. It wasn't like he ever hesitated. But here, this thing, I knew Jack Kennedy, and you know Jack Kennedy. If you remember that, that's kind of what this is. So Gideon, not to take away, but he's not. He's as the further we go along in history, then kind of like the greater challenges we have in leadership and also in the level of faith and also what they're up against. Okay, they always say that Rabbi Schwab in his commentary on Chumash, he always says one of the reasons why Yaakov blesses, when we switch Ephraim and Manasseh, is that because one was younger, the younger one first, because he's further away from the source of the family, so he needed more. Like he needed more of a bracha. He's living, especially, and why them first? Because they grew up in Golos, and they grew up in diaspora, not in Israel per se, which whatever it was at the time, Eretz Canaan, and therefore they needed more. So it's kind of that thinking. But here, so we're going to see actually he has to deal with a little bit of a fallout, which we'll see now and as the battle continues. But Gideon getting a lot of airtime, really, really a lot of stuff. But the phraseology that's used and this and that, really, really interesting, especially if we look back to some of the episodes in Bereshit. So now you understand the further comparisons. He has 300, Abraham had 318. So here, again, that's just further the similarities. And again, many of the Mefarshim point out that the compare and contrast, and perhaps going backwards in terms of learning the story of Avraham sort of retroactively through this story and the efficacy of that, but it's only brought forth with this strong
story.
I'm saying about how destroying his father's idols and this and that. I don't know if you were here. If we did that?
Sorry.
So there's go back and look at, we did it from Nadi Halkat. When we did the piece from Nadi Halkat?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So that whole story, like that, he compares these two chapters. A lot of the modern Parshanim do that. So yeah. So we'll next time at Hashem we'll do this. So we have Purim coming up next Tuesday. I have a conference. I'm at a conference, my Zionism conference in Nebuchadnezzar to be in Florida. So probably gonna rain. I hope it rains the whole day because I said I have to sit there on a beautiful golf course and watch everybody tee off. It's a Zionism conference from the LaFell Foundation and the Maimonides Foundation. which I'm on the steering committee. So it's our second year of doing it. It's now we have like 125 rabbis from all across, and just because, they need it. Trust me, they really, really need it. So, but everybody should have a Freilich and Purim and a really good, just, we need the Yeshua's Nechamas. Allah needs some Porker. Take care.